So, welcome to the latest episode of Inside Inter Miami. As you see, I am starting the show today instead of Andre. Andre's on vacation this week, so I'm going to be in charge right now. But we have a special guest today who's going to be joining me, which is our Miami Heat beat writer. Yes, Miami Heat beat writer Anthony Chang. Anthony has covered the Miami Heat for 8 years and the last five at the Miami Herald. So the reason we thought it would be cool to have Anthony come in as the guest host this week is because he, like many people in South Florida and around the world, really were not paying too much attention, if any attention at all, to Inter Miami before Lionel Messi got here this summer. He is like a lot of people who, was a casual fan at best, or maybe not a fan at all. He's going to tell us. And just sort of to get the perspective of somebody who is new to the team, somebody that Leo Messi brought in, and just sort of get that perspective of a newbie as opposed to the old bee, which is me. I am the OG. It's the OG and the newbie. So I am the OG who's been here forever and a half since the Miami Fusion days. So I've been all about soccer for a long, long, long time. For 3 decades, I've been sort of the patron saint of soccer in South Florida. Anthony is from South Florida, has been following all the other sports, but was not really following Inter Miami until Messi got here. So as we go through the show today, you're going to be hearing the perspective of somebody who's very experienced in sports, but sort of new to MLS and new to Messi in person now, and sort of would be interesting to get Anthony's perspective. So, hello, Anthony. If you want to just give us a little brief intro in your own words.
Yes, hey Michelle. Thanks for having me. This is strange. I'm so used to doing the Heat podcast. This is different. Um, yeah, I'm like the stereotypical Miami fan, I guess you would say, right? I was follow Inter Miami, the score, look at the score, see how they were doing. Obviously, most of the time they weren't doing great. And when Messi got there, I was like, it's the Heat off season. Um, my workload was a little less than usual. I could maybe follow Inter Miami, see what happens. I think they were the worst team in the MLS when Messi got there, and I was interested in kind of how the Messi impact. Can he really lift the team from the bottom of the standings and make them one of the best teams in the league? And that kind of was the draw. And I got the Apple package. I started following the team, and I really got into it. It was a fun few months of just kind of watching soccer. The Leagues Cup was awesome. Obviously, that was kind of, I think, a really good kickstart. Not only for me, but I'm sure for other people too. And watching Inter Miami, of like watching that tournament and obviously their success in it, and it was exciting. But yeah, before this, I would watch the World Cup. Um, I really didn't follow soccer closely outside of the World Cup. But now I think that's going to change because I really, really enjoyed, and not only because of Messi. Like I started, Messi draws you in, but then you learn about other players and these young guys from South Florida. Actually, there's a bunch of them: Noah Allen, Gramashki, Ruiz. Right? There's a bunch of them that are from here. Like they're just a lot of cool stories in the team. Um, and yeah, I Messi drew me in, but I think other stuff too have kind of kept me interested in it, even when Messi has been, he hasn't played much recently. So that's kind of my story and kind of how I've gotten into this team.
Yeah, and just, following up on that, what was your preconceived notion of
Mm.
MLS and of Inter Miami before you started tuning in and actually watching on a regular basis? What was your preconceived notion of the league, of the team, the quality, whatever, the atmosphere, and what have you found now in reality?
Yeah, I mean, I think the preconceived notion is that people say the MLS isn't good. It's not high quality soccer, right? And Inter Miami, it was, it's a new team. They're trying to build things up. They're obviously trying to build a new stadium and by the, Miami International Airport. Right now they're playing in Fort Lauderdale. I thought it was cool that there was a team down here, again. But it's a young team, so and they hadn't been playing very well, obviously. So that was kind of my thoughts on the team entering all this. And then MLS, again, I feel like the preconceived notion has always been it's just not, it's not one of the best leagues in the world. But watching it, there are some obviously Messi and Busquets and Alba change things, but even other teams. Like I remember they played, I think it was Dallas during the League's Cup, and I was really impressed. I forget his name. I'm sorry. They had an Argentinian, I think forward it was, but he was really really good. And there's, Nashville has, the I think
Yeah,
it's
Honey
German.
Muhtar,
Yeah,
very
yeah,
good.
yeah,
Yep.
very good. There's a lot of world class players in the league. So that part has been impressive. It's been different than what I expected for sure.
Yeah. So, well, we're gonna review last night's game. We're gonna start with that. The game was one where there wasn't really anything to play for except pride. Inter Miami is already eliminated, is already eliminated from the playoff run. Uh, Messi was not playing. He was there. He did make the effort, which was important, I think, for the team. I think it was really important for the other players on the team and for the fans to see that he did make the effort. He came all the way from Peru uh, to watch the game. He didn't get to play. Obviously, he had just played the night before, scored 2 goals, played 90 minutes. So we didn't really expect that he's going to fly all the way from Peru to Miami and jump onto the field. But he did make the effort to be there. He was there, and that every time he is present, it elevates the energy in the building. It raises the energy of the players, it raises the energy of the fans who are hanging over the edge trying to get pictures of him in the box and in the parking lot and all that stuff. So just the fact that he was there and he attended was something good for the team. They didn't really have anything to play for except pride, and also the players who were sort of on the bubble for next season. Tata Martino had said these few last 2 games are going to be really important for players who are on the bubble, who are sort of trying to build their resume and prove to the coaches that they should be brought back next year. So it was an important game for different reasons, not necessarily for the playoffs because they were not in the playoffs anymore, but it was a chance for some of those players to step up and a chance for the team to sort of end a winless. They had gone 5 games winless. As it turned out, the winless streak now extends to 6. They did get a tie. They rallied to get the tie. It looked like they were going to get a loss. It looked like it was going to be, a third loss in a row, fourth loss in a row. But instead, they did manage to get out. They got the tie from a very unlikely source, Robbie Robinson. Who would have thought? Robbie Robinson, he was the first round, very first #1 draft pick for Inter Miami in the inaugural season. Such high hopes. This guy was a huge star at Clemson, the best player in the country in college soccer. He's big, he's fast, he has skills. He was the leading scorer in the country in college. So he came in, even though the college draft in MLS is not the same as the NFL and the NBA, it's not obviously not the best players in the world that are coming out of college, but from the college ranks, he did come in with a huge resume, and there were very high expectations for Robbie Robinson. And he has shown flashes over all these 4 seasons. He has shown flashes, um, but he has been very, very injury prone, and it's been a real disappointment that he has not been able to play a consistent string of games to really show what he can do. Every time he plays a game, he gets a hamstring injury, and then he's out for the next 4 weeks or 6 weeks. Um, and he's had even longer injuries than that. So this is a guy with a lot of physical talent, a lot of promise, but has not really been able to put it all together, largely because of injuries. So he comes in the 73rd minute, and late game sub, like, oh, Robbie Robinson. Oh yeah, I mean, some people maybe even forgot that he was on the team because he hasn't played in so long. And he comes in and immediately, almost, within 8 minutes or whatever, he scores the tying goal and then almost scores the game winner in extra time. He had another opportunity that was very, very close. So he came in and made a case for himself, even though it was just a few minutes at the end of the game. He once again showed that he is capable of being a good player and has the physical skills. And this happens in every sport. I'm sure you've seen it in the Heat and in college
Yeah.
basketball, or basketball in general, where a guy comes in with huge expectations and it just hasn't panned out for him here in Miami. And so he's a guy that's going to be on the bubble going forward because he's had 4 years to prove himself and really has not been able to put together a string of games. He's had, again, flashes where he looks really good. And you say, wow, if this guy could stay injured, if this guy could stay injury free, what a good player he could be for this team. And then Nico Stefanelli scored the other goal for Miami. And he's another guy who spent a lot of time on injury reserve this year, just on the bench because of an injury early in the season. And finally, he's getting to come back, an Argentine player who, again, has a lot of potential, has shown flashes of skill, is a real student of the game. He's a very smart player, but has not been able to really show much this year because he's been out much of the year. So this was an opportunity for guys like that. And then the big story last night, and in Tata Martino's words, the biggest story of the night was the return of Gregory. And Anthony, probably you haven't seen Gregory play that much because you were not a fan before. And Gregory got injured in the third game of this season, and he was the captain of the team. He is beloved by all the players. He's a real locker room unifier. And even though he doesn't really speak much English, but he's able to unify everyone in the locker room. He's a real team leader and was the captain of the team before Messi got here, and then Yedlin was the captain in the interim. But Gregory's been out all year. He got injured in the third game of the season, a foot injury that required surgery. And then once he came back, seemed like he was going to come back, and he had a little setback. So he finally came back last night after missing 7 months. He had not played at all for 7 months, and he was in the starting lineup last night. And Tata was very excited that he played 60 minutes with great intensity. He didn't seem hesitant at all. He wasn't tentative, which a lot of players are when they're coming off an injury. He was good. He was strong. He got a yellow card, which is right back to his old ways of getting yellow cards. And Tata said that that was the best news for him of the game going forward to next season. So, the game was one that was not really important from a standings standpoint because they're out. They're out of the playoffs. There's not going to any chance they're going to be in the playoffs, but it was an opportunity for some of these other guys to get a chance. I don't know if you got a chance, Anthony, to see any of the
Yeah,
replays.
I did. Yeah, and it's important, right? Like you don't want to end the season on a bad note, on a losing streak. Like yes, they didn't get a win, but they got a result. And like you said, these are important moments for the young players, the guys in the bubble, just to continue developing, guys to prove themselves. Another one, Alba returning, right? I know didn't play until the 60th minute, but that was a good sign. He hadn't played almost in a month. Um, and Avilas was another guy. I'm trying to think of like what stood out from what I watched. That that pass for that first goal, I think, to Stefanelli was really really beautiful. So there were just a lot of moments that you're like, okay, I guess this doesn't matter in the long run, right? Whether they win or lose, they're out of the playoffs. But you want to see continued progress, and I think you saw that in that match. The one thing I would say is one thing I've since I started watching this team, Calendar has been incredible. He's been, I mean, he's a backup, I think, USA goalie, and he's really, really stood out as one of the better goalies in the league. Probably wasn't his best game yesterday, right? There were both goals. Like I think the first one went off his fingertips. The second one he slipped. Probably like in peak Calendar form, he probably would have stopped at least one of those, maybe both in some games. But look, they got the tie. They didn't lose a third straight match. So that's a good thing for Inter Miami, and hopefully for them they can end the season with a win on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, I think the team is tired, to be honest.
Yeah,
They're exhausted. Like when you talk about Drake, he's just been in, they're going on nearly 50 games this team has played because there's
yeah,
34 league games, and then they had all the League Cup games and the US Open Cup, and for some of these guys, national team games as well with their national teams. So a lot of these guys are coming up on 50 games this season. They've been playing every 3 or 4 days. They were coming off a good break here, the international break. Although some of the players like Kamal Miller, for example, with the Canadian national team, he went to Japan. He went to Japan and during this
Wow.
break went all the way to Japan, played for the Canadian national team, and then flew back.
Doesn't
Which
sound like a
again,
break
I'm
to
sure
me.
that
Yeah, that
yeah,
doesn't
I'm
sound
going to
like a
ask
break.
you about that
Yeah,
as a newcomer, to being a full-time soccer fan
yeah.
now. You know, how strange is it for you to see? Can you imagine the NBA in mid-season just saying, "Okay, we're going to stop now." A bunch of 10 players or half the players on the team, which in Miami's case it is about half, are going to now go and scatter around the world and play in random games all over the world for their national team while the league is still going on. How does that strike you as a new fan?
Yeah, obviously it's very strange, as someone who follows the NBA closely and like obviously the NFL and baseball and all that, like you don't see that. One thing I will say, and I know that there's been talk about this, and I think Tata Martino mentioned this earlier in the season, is the MLS going to observe that break moving forward? Like, are they going to pause the schedule during those windows? Because I feel like that, yes, it's strange in a vacuum itself that players are leaving in the middle of the season to go play in another part of the world for their national team. But the fact that the MLS continues playing and like the product is obviously diminished, right? Because teams all over the league are missing their best players because of this. That part is strange too. It's like you would think the MLS would say, okay, this is happening during this week. Let's take a break or resume play when this is over. And that hurt Inter Miami this year, right? And like you said, the guys are tired because they're going back and forth. They're playing in these extra matches, and again, the product is not probably what it should be because teams aren't 100%.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I do think MLS, this is definitely going to be a topic of conversation in the postseason this year. Tata has been bringing it up pretty much every press conference, so he's definitely making his pitch. But I think MLS needs to take the international break. I mean, there are so many players and also you're penalizing the teams that have the most national team players, which right now is Miami is definitely one of the most, if not the most. So it is it's been the most for the last couple of windows. So um, it's penalizing the teams that have the most national team players. You're penalizing your best teams when you continue to play through the international break. No other leagues around the world play through their international breaks. So I think for MLS to be taken seriously internationally, that's one thing they need to do. They don't have relegation and promotion. Okay, fine. But at least be like the rest of the world and stop during the FIFA breaks. You need to stop and not play games during those breaks. Plus, most fans are following their national teams during those breaks anyway. So I think it makes sense to just stop during those breaks. And I do think that they're going to do that. I mean, they're going to talk about it. I don't know if they're going to do it. I know that they are definitely going to talk about that coming forward during this off season. So anyway, we'll see what happens with that. Speaking of national teams and breaks, we're going to go back to the question that everybody has right now with Lionel Messi, who is coming off a great win for Argentina with not so much that they beat Peru 2-0, but the way that Messi played. He was the old Messi, he was the old GOAT, the old Leo. He played 90 minutes. He seemed to be playing freely. He seemed to be playing fully fit and feeling confident, which had been missing since September 3rd, really, since the Miami's game at LAFC. Ever since he went to that first international break and got injured, things have not been the same for him. But this last game Tuesday night against Peru, he played really, really well. He scored 2 goals, the only 2 goals that they scored, and he looked like the old Leo Messi. And after the game, on the sideline, much surprise to everybody who was watching, including me, he said that he plans to play, that he's going to come back, train, and play in the game that remains. He literally said, "I'm going to come back and train and play in the game that remains." The game that remains for him would be this Saturday at Charlotte FC in the last game of the season, a game that doesn't mean anything, obviously, for Inter Miami. It is a game that still means something to Charlotte. And by the way, it's a game that's on artificial turf, which that has always been a topic of conversation. Would he be willing to play on artificial turf? He happened to miss the Atlanta game, injured, and that was a game that was on artificial turf. So now this would be a game that he would have to play on artificial turf. Um, will he play? Will he not play? The city of Charlotte, all the fans are dying to know. A lot of fans bought tickets. It's a big stadium. They're expecting a huge crowd. Then, when it seemed like he was not going to play, I think a lot of those fans started trying to sell off the tickets and the ticket prices were dropping. Now, with the possibility that he is going to play, I think the ticket prices will probably go up again because people are saying, oh, wait a minute, maybe he is going to play now. Let me go get those tickets. Oh, never mind. Remember that ticket that I was going to sell you? Never mind. Never mind. I want that ticket for myself. Uh, so will he play or won't he play? That's kind of been a question leading into many games in the last month or 6 weeks. Is he going to play or is he not? He said he is. He intends to. Tata, when I asked him last night, so did you watch the interview? And he said he's going to play. What do you expect him to play? He said, I did see the interview. I did see what he said. I have not had a chance to talk to him because he just arrived from Peru. I just had a chance to say hello. He said Thursday, after Thursday's training, they will confer, they will talk and discuss and see if he is, in fact, ready to play again on Saturday. So, is it 100% that he's going to play? No. Is there a chance that he's going to play? Yes. I know that doesn't help the people who are buying tickets or considering buying tickets. There is a chance, though, that he will play, but I wouldn't say that it's 100% at this point because nobody has said that it's 100%. But he said he intends. It seemed like the intentions were there for him to come and train today and tomorrow, Thursday and Friday, and then play in the remaining game. That's what he said he's going to do. Will he do that? Remains to be seen. I do think, honestly, if he could play, it would be good for him to play. He has missed so many MLS games, and MLS is paying him, not MLS, Inter Miami is paying him a lot of money, which we're about to go over in a minute, the salary list that was released yesterday. He is by far the highest paid player in this league. Everyone already knew that, but now we know the actual figures. He's also getting, in deals with Apple TV. When he doesn't play, I'm sure the Apple TV viewership goes down. When he does play, it goes up. So Apple is one of his sponsors. MLS, he's the biggest star in the game right now in this league. The point was, he's going to come here and the league, he's going to help promote the league and help promote Inter Miami. So if he can play on Saturday, I do think it would be good for him to play because the team is going to China in a few weeks to play 2 games in China. And he's going to play there because this is a Chinese marketer that is sending them over there. And Lionel Messi is the reason. The Chinese market is huge with Messi. The Asian market in general is huge with David Beckham and with Lionel Messi. And the reason that they're going there is to showcase Leo Messi. They're not going there to showcase Robbie Robinson and Noah Allen. As wonderful as they are, that is not why this Chinese promoter is bringing them over. They're bringing them over to showcase Messi in front of all these Chinese fans who love Messi and worship Messi. And I guarantee you, he is going to play in China. So the optics to me don't look that great if he's well enough to play in Argentina, in Peru, well enough to play in China, but not well enough to play even a fraction of the game on Saturday in the United States, in the league that he plays in for his team. I just think it would be really uplifting for his team going into the season finale to know that their most important player is going to make the effort and play. I also think for the fans in Charlotte who were really, really looking forward to this and bought tickets a long time ago, I know that that's not his responsibility, and we've debated that on other shows. Does he have responsibility? And Alexi Lala said yes, he does. Does he have a responsibility? Does he not to play? And I'll ask you, Anthony, as someone who has followed LeBron James and all these big stars in the NBA now who are doing load management.
Hmm.
Back in the past, there was no such thing as load management. Players played. There were 82 games in the NBA. They played 82 games. However many games, if there were 34 games in MLS, you played 34 games. I mean, that is your job. That's what you're being paid to do. Now, athletes are taking more care of themselves because they can extend their careers. So obviously, I'm not saying that Leo Messi should go out there and just trash his body. He's 36 years old. He does need to be careful. He has two very important World Cup qualifiers coming up in later November, which are really big against, two big opponents in Brazil and Uruguay. So he does have to manage how much he plays. But I do think it would be really good for the league, really good for the team, for his own teammates, if he were to play at least a little bit on Saturday. What do you think, as someone who follows a league where the athletes have started talking a lot about load
Yeah.
management?
Yeah. I think to kind of go back to earlier this season, the time Messi missed, I know there was a lot of talk, like you said, about does he have does he have a responsibility to be out there? I think it's more on the league and the team than Messi. Messi was had a real injury, as you know, Michelle. I mean, I think people know that by now. He had a real injury, tried to play through it, had to leave that match early when he tried to play a month ago. But transparency behind it is different than the NBA, where like the NBA now you have to issue an injury report a day before the game. Each game it has to be at 5:30 p.m. You have to give them a certain status. You can't like all of a sudden say someone's out when they weren't on the injury report the day before. So I think the transparency probably can improve in the MLS. So that's what I would say. But besides that, like as it relates to the Saturday's match, I see both sides, right? Like this game doesn't matter. You don't want if Messi gets hurt, right? That would be awful for the sport and for him. But at the same time, I could see Messi saying, "Look, I finally feel healthy for the first time in a while. I played really well for Argentina a few days ago. I want to continue. I don't want to take another long break. I want to continue playing this next match and end the season right. So I see both sides. Like you said, he's gonna probably play in China. So it's like there are gonna be games he plays in soon that don't have maybe the stakes of or are they going to MLS playoffs or the League's Cup, but he's gonna play because he's a draw, and that matters, right? That's why he's the highest paid player in MLS is because he's a draw. So you want him out there as much as possible, but at the same time, you do have to be careful as the team because you want to protect Messi, and Messi has to be careful too. Like you said, he's not a young guy anymore, and he has two important matches coming up uh, with Argentina. And look, the offseason isn't that long in MLS. Like the training camp starts in a few months. So you want to keep him healthy. Maybe the middle ground is he doesn't start. Maybe he comes in the second half and plays, 30, 40 minutes. Maybe that's what they do. But it will be interesting to see how they handle it because, yeah, like you, I just assumed he wasn't playing the rest of the season once they were eliminated from the playoffs. I just thought, why risk it? But I guess when you look at it and the way he played for Argentina a few days ago, maybe it does make some sense to get him out there for at least for a little bit.
Yeah, and we talked to Tata last night about which is more important. Have they talked to him, or has he expressed that which is more important? And in Tata's mind, he was asked, is his obligation to his national team more important, or is his obligation to Inter Miami more important? And Tata said point blank, he is a pro national team coach. So he said, having been a national team coach himself, he was the national team coach of Mexico. He was the national team coach of Argentina. And, so he knows he knows how important it is to be on a national team and for the coach of the national team to get the best players in the best form. So he said that he is always going to tell an athlete to play for their national team. He would never ever tell even Ben Kramaski, who was playing, if he's playing for the US under 20 team or he's playing for the US Olympic team. He said he would never tell an 18-year-old not to play for his national team. And he's not going to tell Leo Messi not to play for his national team because he has a game to play in his club. So he fully understands and supports any athlete, not just Messi, any athlete who wants to play for their national team, even if it means that. Now, what he said is what we discussed earlier. He doesn't think they should miss league games for their national teams. So he is a full proponent of stopping MLS, of stopping league play during the FIFA windows, because if that's the case, you can let your players go, let them play for their national teams, and the club team is not going to suffer unless the athlete obviously gets injured in one of those games. But otherwise, you're not missing your best players because they happen to be on their national team. So the answer to a lot of this going forward is what we mentioned earlier. MLS needs to get with the rest of the world, pause the league during the FIFA window. When they say international break, that means you're taking a break from your league to play international matches. And MLS needs to do that. MLS needs to take that break and needs to let their players go play for their national teams. Um, so we mentioned just before about salaries, and Messi is obviously the highest paid player on this team. You know, we all know that. Everybody knows that. Um, Yesterday we finally got the actual numbers of what is his salary. Nobody really knew. It turns out that his salary, now this is an annualized salary. I'll start by saying this is the annual salary. He only came here in July. 2/3 of the season was already over. So he really only played, 4 months and 1/3 of the season. But his annualized salary is 12 million base salary, 20 million guaranteed, which includes bonuses and other incentives and things like that. So his salary of 20 million and 12 base and 20 million total is by far the biggest in the league. The second highest, I was actually a little surprised that it was this high, was Insigne from Italy, who plays for Toronto, which was the last place team, and he's at 15 million. 15 million is still a very, very high salary for MLS. So Messi is making $20 million. This year, probably closer to 10 million because it's annualized and he only played from July until October. So maybe even less than 10 million that he's actually going to make this year. But just for people to have an idea what his salary is, that is his salary. And then the next highest on the Inter Miami payroll is on paper Joseph Martinez at 4 million, but Atlanta, it's a little deceiving because Atlanta is paying 2/3 of that. Atlanta bought out his contract to let him go, and they covered 2/3 pretty much of his contract. So Miami's paying about 1/3 of the 4 million for Joseph Martinez. And then after that, the bigger surprises, I think, for most people is that Jordi Alba is only, and it seems crazy to say the word only because I would love to make $1 million, but he's making 1 million and Sergio Busquets 1.5 million. For the level of players that they are coming from Barcelona, those numbers seem very low. $1 million compared to like 4 million was Joseph Martinez's salary, even though it's split between Atlanta and Miami. His salary was 4 million, and Sergio Busquets, one of the greatest midfielders of all time, at 1.5, and Jordi Alba, one of the greatest left backs in this generation, at 1 million. I think that surprised a lot of people. And the thing is, from what I understand, they are still receiving quite a bit of money from Barcelona at the tail end of their contracts from Barcelona. So this year's salary for Inter Miami was not going to be very high. The reason they came here was really not for the salary. The reason they're coming here is because they wanted to play with Lionel Messi. All of them together wanted to play together. They wanted to play in the United States with their buddy Lionel Messi and be reunited. And so they are willing to take only a paltry $1 million or 1.5. The other thing that may surprise, and I'll ask you as a new fan, is the fact that the lowest paid players on the team, who include players like Ben Hakramaski, who is
Yeah, I
a
saw that.
regular starter, $67,000. $67,000 for Noah Allen, $67,000 for Ben Hakramaski. These are guys who have been catapulted into starting roles this year. So when you see that a professional athlete in MLS who is a starter is making $67,000. How does that strike you as someone who covers the NBA?
Yeah, anytime you see professional sports and you see a salary of $67,000, which, for the average person is a solid salary, but for an athlete, it's kind of, yeah, it is surprising. It's because you were so used to athletes getting the minimum deal was $1 million. So it is different, obviously, nonetheless. That was kind of when I looked at the list yesterday that you posted at the Miami Herald's website, Michelle. That was one thing that really stood out was the lower end guys. I'm not used to seeing that an athlete making, less than $100,000 a year. So it is kind of unique to the MLS as far as like American professional sports. But I had two questions for you, Michelle. One, are you surprised by Messi's salary, whether it's like you thought it'd be higher or lower? And two, is this list something they release every year at this time, or was this because of everyone was questioning, Messi's salary and wanted to know what that number was that they released it, or kind of how does that work?
They do release it every year. Yeah, they release it every year. And actually, they had already released it earlier this year. In May, I believe, is when they first released the 2023 salaries. The MLSPA has tried very hard to be very transparent, and it helps the players, obviously, going into the off season, the players who are going to be free agents and the players that are going to be negotiating. It's important for them, for everyone to see what the salaries are and what the salary disparities are. It's really important for them to see. So the MLSPA has been for the last several years releasing releasing the list, and it's always very interesting. It's always super interesting for the reporters and also for the fans who watch the league to see where everybody stands at this point. And you also notice when you look on the salaries for Inter Miami and for all the teams that the players who are on loan, they still have to pay those salaries. That's still on their payroll. So that's something that you also don't see in other leagues, this thing about loaning players.
Hmm.
But for example, LGP, Leandro Gonzalez Perez, who's an Argentine player who was on Inter Miami, he is still on their payroll at $1 million. $1 million. He is one of
Wow.
the highest paid. He gets paid as much as Jordi Alba, and he doesn't play for the team. They are paying for him to play in Argentina because they still have to carry his salary. Sometimes the other team pays part of the salary and they pay the other part of the salary, but his salary of 935,000 and 1 million guaranteed compensation is still the responsibility of Inter Miami. So that's also something that a lot of other leagues, don't have that. Where in this league and in soccer, when you loan players, you're still responsible for part of their salary. So, um, did it surprise me, Leo Messi's salary? Um, it didn't surprise me too much because the majority of his money, the $150 million that's being thrown around about the package that he signed for has a value. It is valued at $150 million. That includes equity in the team upon retirement. So that is going to be a big chunk of his money. A big chunk of his money is going to be equity in this club upon retirement. This club is going to be worth even more than it is now. Let's say it's 300 million for a club now with Messi on it, for the next two seasons, with all of the tickets they're going to sell, with all of the shirts they're going to sell, with the Apple revenue that's going to come in because of him and because of this team, the value of this club will rise over the next 2 years. So it may be more than 150 million at the end of the day that he gets total, but the majority of his package is probably not going to be, they haven't told us the breakdown, but seeing that the salary is 12 million base, 20 million guaranteed, if that holds true, or even if he makes more over the next 2 years, um, it's probably not going to be the majority of the 150 million total. The total is going to be because he's getting equity in the team, and presumably maybe the stadium also, which is going to be open supposedly in 2025 at the end of the year. Um, if he becomes part owner of the stadium and part owner of this club, that is where the big bulk of his revenue is going to come, and from the club side. Now, he's also making money from Apple for every subscription that is sold for the MLS season pass. He gets a cut. He gets a cut of every jersey from Adidas. And, they've been selling more jerseys than any other one in the league. And one of the top selling jerseys in the world right now is that pink Inter Miami number 10. So he's making a lot of money. We don't have to feel sorry for Lionel Messi. He's making lots and lots and lots of money. But the majority of his money is not going to be from the payroll itself from Inter Miami. That's the way I see it. So, but anyway, yeah, it is interesting just to see the $67,000 to see professional athlete making that in the United States. When you see the numbers in Major League Baseball, football, NBA,
Yeah.
even hockey, it's not that low.
Is that salary, is it a 1 year, does it change every year in MLS, or are they, or is like Hermashki under a certain contract where he'll get paid more next year? How does that, how does the salary structure work for a player like that?
Right. Yeah, well, the league minimum is the 67,000, which is what they
Yeah.
signed. All of those young players that they brought up from the academy, that's what they signed for. This is year by year, so this is their first year, the first year salary. A lot of times it stays that way for a couple of years until they prove themselves, until they renegotiate. I would think, I mean, Kremaski as a starter, if you're his agent, you're going to try to restructure that so that he's not making the minimum salary next year. So yeah, it is, but they sign contracts usually for 2 or 3 years, with an option, 2 years with an option for a third year. But sometimes if there is a lot of interest in a player, sometimes they can renegotiate and get players up to a higher level than what they started at. So we'll see what happens next year. Um, you know, but it'll be interesting to see going forward. I wanted to end before we go on, before we finish up and wrap up. The last thing I want to talk about today is about Luis Suarez. Everyone is wondering. The big question going into this offseason is who's going to stay, who's going to go, and who might come in. Is there another star coming, especially up top in the forward position? Um, Luis Suarez is the name that comes up the most. He would be the fourth in the FC Barcelona, retirement tour. Not retirement, obviously, they're still playing, but the guys who have left FC Barcelona, the four of them
Right.
are friends. Lionel Messi, Sergio Busquets, Jordi Alba, and Luis Suarez were all teammates at Barcelona. They are friends. They all four wanted to come over, to be honest, is what I'm hearing and what I've always heard, that Suarez always wanted to come here with the other three, but he signed a complicated contract with Gremio in Brazil, which was going to make it very difficult and extremely expensive for him to get out of that contract, which was through 2024. He has worked out a deal, according to many reports. He has worked out a deal where he would be able to leave in December. If that holds true, I believe that Inter Miami will definitely try to sign him. Tata Martino, who never talks about names of players who are not on the team, said the word Suarez, said the word Luis in his quotes, and said, as we're planning for the future, we are looking at a scenario with Luis and we're looking at a scenario without Luis.
I saw that quote and I was like, whoa, that you rarely see a coach say something like that.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that he's even mentioning that we
Yeah.
are in our planning for next season, we have one scenario with Luis Suarez on the roster. We have another scenario without Luis Suarez on the roster. So clearly he is a target. He is definitely a target that they would like to land. Um, he also has some knee issues, and that is another situation. Apparently, he is going to Spain for some kind of treatment for a knee issue. There were rumors that the knee injury was fake, that it was, overblown because he's just trying to get out of the Gremio contract. But it does seem that he has some kind of knee issue that is going to be addressed during the offseason. So I don't know how much that will weigh into what they would want to pay him or what they would be willing to risk to bring him over here. But if they bring him, I think it would be, either Campana would have to go or Joseph Martinez would have to go. Joseph Martinez is at the end of this contract. He has been sort of up and down this year, was making $1 million plus from the team. Leo Campana is the young guy that they are really investing in and believe in for the future, although he also has value around the league. Some other teams around the league may offer quite a bit of money for Leo Campana. I don't think they would offer that much money for Martinez, but I do think that there are teams who would want Leo Campana. So there's going to be some negotiating and some shopping going on during the off season, and it'll be interesting to see if Luis Suarez comes in, then who goes? Is it the young Leo Campana, who has had some injury issues, but so has Joseph Martinez, and Joseph Martinez has been more expensive. So I don't know. What do you think about that, Anthony, going forward?
Yeah, as a casual observer, my initial thought would be Campana is something different for this team. It's kind of unique in that part of the field for them, where he's a big body, he's good in set pieces. A lot of their goal scorers are smaller players that maybe don't have that as a strength. But the one thing I've noticed about Campana is not only is he really skilled, obviously, but he's tall, and that lends to something unique on this roster where there aren't many of those type of players on this team right now. And again, he's when he's in there and there's a corner, you know that he's one of the top targets because he can head in the ball, and that's a strength of his. So if I had to pick between the two, I would say Campana because of that he brings something different than maybe the other scorers do on this roster, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a great point. No, that is a great point. It's a very short team. They really don't have too many players over 6'1". So Campana is a target. He's a tall target for set pieces. He has scored many of his goals have been off headers last year and this year. So he brings a different component. Joseph Martinez is interchangeable with some of the other players they have, whereas I do think Leo Campana is not interchangeable. The one guy who is sort of tall is Robbie Robinson. But again, he's been so injury prone that I don't think that they're going to be relying on him as their top number 9. So that's definitely not the situation. And that being the case, I think that probably Leo has a better chance of sticking than Joseph Martinez, but we'll see going forward. Tata does have a good relationship with Joseph, and Joseph has shown in flashes that he can be the old Joseph. But it'll be interesting to see going forward what happens with Luis Suarez. So
Yeah.
on that note, we're going to end this week's episode. Next week, Andre will be back. We're going to miss you, Anthony, but you're welcome to join in anytime. We can do a
This was
three-way
fun.
conversation.
Yes, this was
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah. So next week we'll be wrapping up the final game of the season, which is Saturday. We will see. Did he play or did he not play? The big question. And then we will really do, excuse me, a deep dive into what's happening going forward, the off season, what to expect. When does the training camp start? When will the new players start coming in? When will the training camp start? And which players may we have seen for the last time? We're going to go over that in the next episode. So thank you so much, everybody who's tuned in to all of our episodes, or even if this is just your first. Thank you for joining us. Please join us again from Inside Inter Miami. I want to say thank you from Michelle Kaufman, from Anthony Chang, from the Miami Herald. You can find this podcast everywhere that you can listen to podcasts, on Apple, on Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. And you can watch us later on YouTube, on your YouTube channel. And thank you again. Thank you so much for joining us.